All right, well, welcome to our live online drawing session here with the Visual Arts Academy and Studio. We're here in Louisville, Kentucky, and normally we have a team of people on here. It's usually me and Seth and Thomas, but tonight Seth is actually doing an exploration oil painting class. And so I'll be hosting tonight, and Thomas will be on here in just a few minutes. He's running a few minutes behind to join the conversation and work on some art together. So tonight I'm going to be working on my comic book pages that I've been working on the last couple weeks. And the one I'm working on today, I'm hoping to be able to finish up here. Um, I've just noticed that there's a bit of a echo, which I've not had that before, so I'm not sure why that's happening. So I apologize, but hopefully we will get this worked out. Let me see here. Well, I'm not sure. Either way, we'll figure it out. If it's annoying, let me know on the comments, but man, that's so crazy. I've set this up the same way every single time, and for whatever reason, today it's doing a bit of echo. So let me look on here. Let's see. Deep Pixel Art, I see. Hello. Let me see here. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to fix that. So let me know if it's super annoying, and I will fix it. Let's see here. For whatever reason, I'm also not seeing comments. Seeing comments on this. Well, I apologize about the little technical issues here to start off with. Let me see if I can turn. This one says it's all the way off. So go to my system here. See if I can turn off the sound totally. Maybe this will help. Hopefully. I think so. All right, let me know if you can't hear me, let me know. Everything is okay. Okay, thank you, Deep Pixel Art. I appreciate that. I turned down my computer mic, and so now I'm not getting an echo. So that's good. So, anyways, thank you all. Sorry about that. That's first couple minutes, a little unprofessional there, but that's all right. We're working it out. So, anyways, as I was saying, today what I'm going to work on is this page. I'm hoping to get this one done. I actually have two that I need to make some small fixes on. And then I'm hoping at some point today to be able to start on the next page. So what I'm going to work on today, you'll see here, this is the page I've been working on last couple of days. It is almost done. I just need to work on this area up top. If you can see, the top third is a little bit blank. And that's actually going to be really easy because it's just a very simple design that I'm going to put up top there. I'm purposely not putting a lot of detail up there just compositionally. So I'm using the rule of thirds here. So 2/3 of this page has lots of detail in, and then the top third is going to be a bit more on the simple side just to give a little bit of balance to the page. And then what I'm going to do is go back to this page that I finished already previously, and I've got to make a few small adjustments for there to be continuity. So for example, on this one, the door behind them, behind that robot character, has glass in it, so you can see through. Whereas on this door up top, it's starting to close. There is no glass, so I need to put in glass there. And then some of these characters here, if you've noticed, I've added some kind of what do you want to say, like robotics to them, some tech on their faces and things like that. But over here, they're not up in the top up here, these guys. So I need to add a little bit of tech to them. Then once that's done, then I'll be able to work on the next page. So yeah, so that's my plan today. I should be able to get that pretty well done. And then, like I said, I'll work on the next page. But in the meantime, what I'm going to do is start working here. I'm waiting on Thomas. He's going to be joining us here in just a few minutes. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you all what you guys are working on. And thank you, of course, for joining us. So I'm going to take a little drink here. And like I said before, normally Seth is with us, but he is helping out someone doing a little oil painting session. So I'll be riding solo here until Thomas gets on. And so this page is, like I said before, it's almost done. We're pretty close. I'm going to start by working on the upper portion here. I also need to fix this little area in here. So I'm going to do that too. Let me erase that. When I first did it, I just kind of added kind of a generic pattern there, but my door on the other page has a very specific pattern. So I want to make sure that they match. So I'm going to take that out. Not a huge deal. Easy change, easy fix. So let's see here. Let's fix that up here. And I also need to figure out where in the pattern the door is going to go on here. So I think what we're going to do, I think we'll do this here. Let's see here. There's that, and then there's fill this in. So yeah, this won't take very long at all to make these little changes here, and then I can work on the next one. The page is looking awesome. Well, thank you. I'm assuming that's Seth, since that's coming from the Visual Arts Academy and Studio page. So thank you so much, Seth. I appreciate it. It is, as I was saying before, it is almost done. So my goal today is to finish up the little details on this page, and I've got a couple of small changes on the other page to make, just for continuity's sake, and then we'll be off to the next page. And so my plan is, after I get the next page done, that'll be the intro section. And so that's the opening, I think 6 pages I have. That'll be done. Once I'm done with that, the pencils on that, I'm going to go back and ink those pages. So here in the next few weeks, you'll get a chance to watch as I do some inking as well. And yeah, and the cool thing about the next page, which I was going to wait till later to say, but the next page is actually going to serve not only as the page, but also as the cover as well. Oh, it looks like Thomas is here. Let me add him on.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how are you?
Good. Unfortunately, I'm having a lot of technical difficulties, so it took a while to get on, and I only have the one camera today, but
no worries. I'm doing awesome. Doing really good. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you.
I'm just going to play around with the format here. Oh, that's good. Yeah. There we go.
So I'm going to be working on this, so maybe that's a good angle.
Let's see here. I don't know which one's better, the bigger one, I think, maybe, or the smaller one. We'll do that one, because in the bigger one, you kind of get cut off a little bit. So we'll do that right there. So
sounds good.
All right. Well, Thomas, how's it going with you? How's your last couple weeks been?
Been good. Here in the new studio, so just been setting up and working away. Started a couple of pieces and continuing work on another one. So.
Oh, that's awesome. So those are your paintings there in the background you're working on?
Yeah, so this is the one I'm working on right now, which is kind of a little boat harbor scene.
Awesome.
And then this one was one that I'd started a while ago. It's kind of an abstract treescape. And so now I'm just, kind of getting more into it. But, it's a lot of color, a lot of brushwork.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So are you using references for either one of those, or are they just kind of off the top of your head?
Yeah, I do references from, photo. Like I'll take the photo, and so either on my phone or a camera. And then, but I don't project or anything like that. I just work straight from the phone reference, or I'll pass it to the iPad sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I try and keep it pretty loose, so
awesome,
as if it were plein air. But It's not,
Yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of situations where you don't have the capacity or it's raining, so you gotta just take the photo and move on.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I would love to hear, and you may have shared this on other episodes before, but I would love to hear kind of your process when you approach either a realistic painting like you have with the boats versus an abstract painting as you have with the treescape.
um, I think they're both kind of similar in terms of starting with like the blocks of values and big shapes. Um, with the realistic, with the boats, obviously we're gonna go more into structured detail on certain things. However, I do paint more impressionistic, so um, you'll see. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done, but there's the buildings in the background are kind of starting to come through.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna do any kind of hard edges or anything like that. But yeah, definitely, there's gonna be more attention to kind of accurate the scale and perception of buildings and perspective versus with the abstract. I'm going to be more focused on the general composition, brushwork, movement, that those kinds of things are going to guide the viewer through.
Yeah, that's great. So how do you have like beforehand you think, I want to do a landscape or I want to, how do you pick what subject that you want to tackle? Is it just kind of random or do you have a specific way that you approach that?
I think, I mean, this one's very specific. The boats to a trip I did recently this year. It was in Italy, so just kind of capturing that. Which again, ideally, I would have had more time, but it was a quick trip and going from one town to the next. So I didn't have the opportunity to draw on site and get kind of what I wanted, but took enough reference photos to capture things. What's tricky there is going to be the color, right? So we have what the camera is going to kind of imitate as color versus what we see. But there's some tricks that you could do, kind of like with the exposure and whatnot on your phone. You can intensify, lighten it up, or whatever. But yeah, with when it's my subject matter, I'd like drawing figure. I'm a figurative artist, but I also do landscape. So I'll show you here. This is kind of a big oil landscape, and
Mm,
that's more. And then over here, excuse the fan, you'll see this is based off of a sculpture by Rodin.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so it's those are kind of my two concentrations. Sometimes I want to do more still life work, but yeah, I tend to
yeah,
just go landscape or figurative.
yeah. So are all those paintings part of a series or are you just kind of working on them as they come or what's your approach with that?
The Rodin is an older painting. It's from 2010, so that was from a show I had a long time ago.
Hmm.
And it was all figurative. The mountains, the landscape, that one is an ongoing series. There's currently two at that size in oil, and there's a small study which I now need to carry out in onto the larger size. Um, this, again, this was a very specific painting that I just wanted to kind of hash out.
Hmm.
Um, I'm doing it in acrylic. Probably should have done it in oil, but it's still
Hmm.
a nice challenge. But yeah, so it's kind of I'm starting to develop kind of like a series, to do for a show or something.
Yeah. Awesome. And do you rather work in acrylics or oil or pencil or what's your medium of choice?
Um, I love pencil for sure, and pastels were my gateway into color. When it comes to paint, I think I favor acrylic, just because I work very fast, so I need it to dry. But
Hmm.
definitely, there's some moments working with acrylic where I think to myself, I should have done this in oil, so I
Yeah.
could visit. But yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. So in your own practice, like you started with pencil and then you work in pastel and then into paint, or were you kind of doing them all together?
No, I definitely. It took me a while to cross over to color, and it was through pastels and color pencil, and then went on to paint. But I definitely do, like the feeling of using paint. It's just a great experience. You don't use paint at all, right?
Yeah, I'm allergic to paint. I
You're
don't
like,
know. No, I've done a few paintings.
uh-huh.
Um, I need I need to really I do need to work on with paint a little bit more. My tendency is because I haven't done it as much, if it doesn't work out the way that I want to, it kind of ends up disintegrating into, and I say disintegrating not in a bad way, but like
Right.
it usually goes into something more abstract because I feel a little more comfortable with that.
Hmm.
So, and that I feel like, and Seth and I talked about this before, where that's a bit of a weakness on my part, where you get to something, it doesn't work out, so then you rely on your strengths rather than like pushing through and really working on it. So most of the paintings I've got one like realistic painting, and then I've got an abstract one hanging here in my office. I've got another abstract one downstairs and a
Right.
couple other abstracts throughout the house. So yeah, not very much realistic, but maybe one of these days Seth will convince me to work with him on something. So yeah. But no, I love pencil, but I've really grown to love charcoal in the last year just because
Right.
it's really gotten me a lot looser, and I feel like I feel like I'm painting when I do that just because of the approach is different. So,
All right.
but hey, so it looks like we have VFX Time, who has been with us for the last, I don't know how long, probably a couple months now. And he is the one that has given me my official nickname as the Humble Wizard. And he made the comment that this wizard doesn't need any paint. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of a running joke around here that I don't touch color or paint, but I do. I just kind of focus on pencil and charcoal mostly. So appreciate that VFX time. So
And you're
yeah.
working on a comic at the moment?
Yeah, so this is volume 3, and this is pages 4 and 5. And
Right.
my goal today is to finish up both of these pages. I just need to go back to page 4 and make a few small adjustments for continuity's sake. Because when I got into page 5, I made some changes to some of the characters that I didn't think about, and so I need to go back to page 4 and just make sure we've got some similarities there, I guess you could say. So just some small things, some like design work on the doors. I put in a bit of glass, put some like headgear on some of the characters, but
Hmm.
I should get this done hopefully in the next hour, and then I'll be starting on a new page after that. So,
Very good.
all right. So for you, what are some of your artistic goals? Like when you look at yourself in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, what do you hope to see for yourself as an artist?
I mean, definitely, being in more shows, trying to get work international, have more exposure. But then in terms of the work, it's just that constant working on the skills, and just getting more accurate, working faster, I think also.
Hmm.
So producing a lot more. I tend to produce slowly. Although I paint rather quickly, I don't paint as often as I should. So ends up,
Yeah.
I don't create as many works as I'd like to get done. So that's always like the constant goal on my
Yeah.
end. But yeah, and just exploring ideas and pushing a little bit more on boundaries for sure. So
Yeah. How do you approach trying to get into shows? Like if you had a new artist that was trying to get discovered or at least trying to get his work out there, what advice or what approach do you take in that?
I think the your main thing is you want to just always be entering shows, and so competitions and all that. That's always a good way to get yourself out there and noticed. Uh, Obviously, digital media is also a great way to get things going. I think with obviously Instagram and those kinds of portals now there's more exposure. But yeah, definitely juried competition type shows are your best way to get a foot in the door and get noticed by
Nice.
galleries.
That's awesome.
We have a comment saying what happened to the live stream on Facebook. But
Oh, well, it should be on there. It says, let me look at my phone because it says that we're on Facebook right now.
I'm gonna get some water for my paintbrushes. I'll be right back.
Let's see here. Yeah, it's on right now. Well, it's under Seth. Let me Visual Academy. Yeah, it's on that.
All
It's
right.
it's on both the Visual Arts Academy, it's under Seth, and it's under me. Or no, just Seth and Visual Arts Academy.
All right.
So sorry if that's not working for you. Oh, okay, he got it. All right, good. All right. Deep Pixel Art asks, how do you overcome nervousness when drawing live in front of an audience? So, I'll take my first. I'll take this first, and then Thomas, you can go if you like. But
Right.
yeah, so at first it is really nerve-wracking because you have no idea who's actually seeing you. So like we have a sense of like how many people are on. Like I can see right now there's a little icon that says there's 7 people watching. Now I don't know if that's all that's watching. That could be just on StreamYard. It could be from Facebook and YouTube. I'm not sure. Like Seth knows more about all that stuff.
Right.
So, but yeah, so there's a sense in which there is a bit of nervousness, like what if I mess up, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, there is kind of an anonymity to it. Like I don't see your faces, so I don't see or know who's actually watching. So you kind of forget. Like for me, I kind of forget that people are watching. So that's really helpful. The problem with that is, I don't know if you've ever watched The Office, the TV show, but I can tend to be like the main character, Michael Scott, and say some weird things. So that's always that's always something that makes me a little nervous that I'm going to say something like really out of context. But other than that, yeah, I mean, at first the idea of going live was really intimidating, but we've seen the response to it has been really good, and people are tend to be very generous and encouraging, so that really helps a lot. I think most people understand that if they were in this position too, they would be nervous. So it's like you kind of give each other a bit of grace because like man, that is hard to do that in front of other people. And then the
Mm-hmm.
other thing too is like it helps teaching because in teaching, like I try to draw beside the other students so they see me when I make mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
and the more that you make mistakes in front of other people, the more you realize it doesn't really matter. I mean, at the end of the day, like we're all going to mess things up. We're all going to draw something or paint something that we're like, not super happy with that. And you
Yeah.
just kind of slowly get over it. So, Thomas, I don't know if you have additional thoughts on that.
I was gonna
How
say,
you,
from my point of view, I think, I mean, ultimately, yeah, you need to overcome it. But when you're drawing or painting, it's a type of meditation in that sense, and it's all about
yeah,
being present and aware. So you just have to really tune into that kind of headspace. Um, yeah, I mean, I think what the nervousness and anxiety, might be if you make a mistake or something, but it's part of the process, right? You
that's
don't
right.
just every brush stroke or line you put down with a pencil isn't going to be perfect, but that's you need to start putting down paint or graphite or charcoal to get your drawing or artwork moving and go fixing it.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think when you
I've
see
used,
time lapse, of like somebody working, you see like how it like molds and shifts. I mean, this one
yeah.
definitely, this central boat here, it's changed a lot, and I think it's just the approach is you want to keep the lines that are solid, and then work around everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just gonna say, even as you were talking, I've used my eraser like 3 or 4 times because I was just this particular arm is very difficult. It's that I'm
Mm-hmm.
drawing. It's foreshortened, and I don't have a reference, so it's
Yeah.
like you just draw it, redraw it until you get it, and that helps out a little bit, I think, for me. So yeah.
Are you working
So
on large pieces as well, or just on the comics right now?
mainly the comics right now. I do have a couple large pieces at the studio that I always have plans in my head to like go in on an off day or early or late at night and stay there and do it. But I've really my focus has kind of shifted to this comic book since we're doing this on the live, and I've really wanted to work on the third book for a while, so this give me the opportunity to do it.
Right.
But yeah, I've got several things going at the same time that I kind of give myself a lot of freedom just to put things aside for a while and then come back, you know, and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
um, let's see here. Deep Pixel Art asks, how do you deal with art block?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
yeah. Go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, when you say art block, what do you mean? I think people say art block and they mean different things. Like, for example, I've heard people say art block and what they mean is they can't come up with a new idea. So they're just stuck and they're just stuck doing their regular stuff. I've also heard people call art block when they don't have any desire to actually draw.
Mm,
And I think those are two different things. I
for
don't think your desire not to draw, I don't think that is art block. I think that's just you're just dealing with your own procrastination, your own issues, or maybe you're just burnt out. You know,
mm,
it's fine. That's different than art block in the way I think. I think art block is you can't come up with a new idea. You feel stuck. You feel like you're just doing the same thing over and over and again. But that's just my personal thought. What about you, Thomas? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it's more like, it could be related to mood for sure. If you're kind of too stressed, or, even though this is a good way to let loose and, let go of stress, but, it definitely, your mood, I think, interacts a lot with creating art. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess I think it's like you said, it's both scenarios. Sometimes it's just you're not in the mood, and so there's nothing you can do. Otherwise, you just push through and do a couple practice things. But I think art block for me would be more if I want to create, like a new idea, a new concept, not working from a specific photo reference or live reference. Um, so I think those are definitely a little bit more difficult to get over those humps. But
Yeah, I think it's also helpful to keep a sketchbook. So, like in the times where in between projects or whatever, you know, sometimes you just need to kind of maybe set a specific goal for yourself. So, if you can't come up with an idea or you feel stuck or whatever, just pick something, some kind of goal. So, like for example, I'm not dealing with art block right now, but I am dealing with so I'm going to be teaching a sketchbook class in July, and
mhm,
so as I've just been thinking through that class, one of the things I've been doing personally is like being intentional with my sketchbook as a way of example as a teacher, but also just for my own art practice. So
right,
one of the things that I made it a goal was to draw, I don't have a set number, but draw a bunch of alien landscapes
mm,
for the silence for
right,
future issues and just to kind of just explore some different ones. So these first couple ones I've drawn, they've been pretty like generic kind of desert wilderness scenes that you would see in a typical
mhm,
sci-fi concept art or whatever. And then from there, I'm going to push myself to do some different ones and try to find something new and original. So, you know, you could do that, or you could say, you know what, I just want to work on portraits, or I want to work on landscapes or architecture. I think for one thing that I tell students a lot is to find the thing you don't like to draw and ask yourself, why is it I don't like to draw that? And typically
right,
it's because that's the thing that they're not very good at. And I always tell them, well, a lot of times in your sketchbook or in your practice, you'll revert to the things that you feel that you like to draw because you're good at those things. But
right,
in order to grow as an artist, you really need to challenge yourself to work on things that you don't like to draw or you find to be very difficult.
yeah,
And you don't necessarily have to stay on that for a long time, but I think that's a good way to really challenge yourself to grow. So that can help break that art block too.
for sure.
Um,
Sure.
yeah. So
So we have a Matt Griffin asked about a 3D abstract piece that I started. I have not finished that one, but I do have a couple here that are finished, so I can show them that. Let me just grab them.
Yeah, Matt, it's good to see you. Good to hear from you. I appreciate you as always and excited about your growth as an artist. Matt has been working on some hyperrealism, so that's awesome. Oh, there you go. Yep.
Here's, yeah, this is a finished framed, but I don't know if with the glare you can kind of perceive it.
Yeah, we
But
can see it.
that's
Yep.
kind of the finished piece. So
That's
you get
awesome.
kind of nice floating. Yeah. So the other one should end up similar to that. It's a different exploration on the same theme, but
That's really cool. Matt says that's awesome.
oh, thanks, Matt. Yeah, those are fun. Definitely, sometimes they're more difficult. They take a lot more work and focus. The first part, kind of laying it out, but then that shading is just, a lot of hours, a lot of meticulous kind of shading and making sure that you're not overworking pencil, but you got to keep building layers. But it's fun. Similar to what I'm doing here. It's hard to see, but let me see if I can get it. So I'm working on the buildings on the back there. And so it's also just a lot of layering of different tonalities because these buildings are very pale, but I want to capture kind of different colors in them. That'll also balance out with the other colors in the water and in the boats, which are more vivid. So, I don't want to just have this block of kind of beige or gray buildings. I want them to each have, character and whatnot.
So I've got a abstract kind of art philosophy question for you.
Yeah.
So you've bought art, I'm assuming, at some point in your life. And when you go to buy art, how would you define how would you select which one you're going to buy, but also how would you define when an artwork is good?
I mean, it definitely needs to first attract you, so it needs to call you or draw you in some form. There's tons of great art that I know is great art, but, it's just not for me in the sense that, even if there's value in collecting that piece for, the value of it or the artist, that doesn't seem like the right way to go about it. A lot of people, also, want to just match a sofa color or something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's an option, but it's not, for me, it's really, it needs to, you know, I talked with Seth about this on one time that you weren't on, and, we were talking about music and, what you want with an art piece is for it to stir something in you, hopefully positive, but you want it to kind of make you feel, or some kind of emotion, or just even if it's just pleasant to look at. And so obviously as a painter or as an artist, I'm also looking at technique, and that's always going to be something intriguing. So I have bought pieces in the past that it's just on sheer technique. It's inspiring, right? Even
Yeah.
if it's a subject matter or a type of painting that I don't do. But yeah, what about yourself?
So yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said. I mean, it's it's kind of that generic saying of, beauty is in the eye of the beholder or whatever. But at the same time, art is kind of that way where, I'll look at some art that people spent, lots and lots of money for and has been, really hot as far as a collector, collection type piece. And I'll look at it and be like, that is horrible. Like just the style or whatever. It's just, and you just have to get back to, like, it's just not your thing, and that's fine. It's other people's thing, and that's fine too. So it's very subjective in that sense. But for me personally, like, yeah, I agree with you. It's one of those things where if you walk in, you see it, it just grabs a hold of you for whatever reason. So like, I've shared this before, but one thing that I saw one time, I was walking through, I forget where I was. I think it was in Cincinnati or St. Louis or whatever. I was in the art museum,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a painting in there that it was in the 19th century room. So most of that art is like still lifes and portraits and kings and all that kind of stuff. And
Right.
I like that, but it's not the, my go-to or whatever, but it's beautiful painting. And there was this one painting in the corner that was just incredible. And it looked like a sci-fi picture, like especially for the time in which it was painted.
Yeah.
It just was incredible. And I eventually went to the gift store and found the print of it and bought
Right.
the print because it just moved me so much. And yet someone else might walk into that same room and think that's a weird painting. It's like out of place,
Yeah.
But for me, it just was yeah, it just drew me in. It was like has this huge like mountainscape and yeah, just the more I looked at it, the more I just kept diving into the painting further and further, looking at all the details and the technique and the story as a whole. And yeah, so I definitely agree with you. It's one of those things where it's a personal interaction that you have with a piece that just
Hmm.
draws you in and that
Yeah.
you love. So and that's different for everyone. There's a couple art collectors I follow on social media, and they'll go through their house and they'll show the different paintings they have or the different sculptures or works of art. And there's so many times I'll look at this stuff and I'm like, man, that just looks really ugly. But that's just my personal opinion. Like they might look at, if I had a collection like that, I'd have a completely different style, and they probably look at it and think my stuff was like boring or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, it's just to each person's taste, I suppose.
Yeah.
So,
I think art, nowadays it's a matter of context. I think before, painting was more catalog style in the sense that it was either a portrait or it was a landscape or still life,
yeah.
uh, or depicting a historic scene or something. Whereas now with the the more broad, or more accessible that art is for more people to be artists, I think that widened the scope of it as well. And then then there's the question of art. I don't know if it's happened to you where like with, let's say, abstract art, like for me also it got to this thing where it was like, do I want to do another realistic still life, or do I want to just kind of make my own language in that sense, and
Yeah.
I mean it's
Yeah.
challenging but it's also fun. And I think with there's lots of art that I don't understand. I mean, you really have to kind of get into the detail of the artist and the approach and what they're trying to say. And I think some, most times it's valid, and they're definitely kind of deconstructing a lot of times art and what art even is. Um, and that's, I think it's valid. But again, if we go back to what your collection is, I mean, that's just a personal thing. It's kind of saying what kind of shoes or brand or whatever you like versus one person to the next. And
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, so Matt asks if you could work on the same piece with any artist other than Seth, living or dead, who would it be and why? That is a good question.
on the same piece with any artist. Hmm. I mean, I love Sargent. Like, I think Sargent's work is just incredible.
Yeah,
His watercolor studies, but then his oils are just a whole other level. So for
yeah.
me, I think uh, yeah, Sargent would be my pick. How about you?
That's a good pick. Yeah. I mean, oh, sorry, that's my well, we have a miniature schnauzer who loves to bark at anything that moves, so
Nice.
apologize about that. But yeah, I think I don't know, like one of my favorite artists that I discovered in college was Marcel Duchamp,
Hmm.
but I don't know if I would want to work with him on something. uh I'd love to watch. There's a lot of artists that I'd just love to watch how they did it.
Right.
Like I think that would be really cool.
I think
Um,
Dali is one of those where
yeah, Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, his stuff's amazing. Although he's pretty crazy. I've seen some like documentaries about him
Oh
and
yeah,
interviews of just some of the stuff that he did in his life, and I'm like, oh, I don't know. He was pretty extreme for me, but yeah, but his work was amazing.
yeah.
So, I mean, yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna say Marcel Duchamp, but
All right.
I definitely love Sargent as well. I mean, his portraits are just incredible, and
Mhm.
I love life drawing. So yeah, I love looking at his paintings, his sketches, his charcoal work is just yeah pretty incredible. So yeah, he'd be definitely one of those people that I would love to work with, or just to be mentored by or like taught.
For sure.
I mean, just the idea of working on the same piece. I don't know if I would feel up to par with that. So like,
Yeah. That's
yeah, I would.
intimidating. I think we're going back to the previous one about being nervous
Yeah,
painting or
yeah.
drawing in front of an audience. I think that's more nerve wracking.
Oh yeah,
Another artist,
yeah, yeah, for
obviously
sure.
a talented artist. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Just kind of a funny example of that I just think it'd be similar of if you were a aspiring actor and you got this like really awesome role and you were having to act with like your favorite actor.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sure you would be so nervous. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, it would just be crazy. So, yeah. Uh, well, Matt, if you can type in there, who would it be for you? Who would
Okay.
you want to work with? That's what I want to know. I have a feeling it'd be probably someone hyper realist artist, probably. That would be my guess for Matt. But I know, one thing I never discussed with Matt is Chuck Close. I don't know, Matt, if you've ever heard of Chuck Close. He was pretty famous back in the 80s and 90s or 80s, I think, 70s and 80s. But he did these huge portraits and they were hyper realistic. But the amazing thing about them was how big they were. Like they were like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 feet tall, these huge portraits, and they were looked like photographs.
Yeah.
So he and I have never really talked about Chuck Close before. So
Yeah. Chuck Close is a good art. Well, was a great artist. He had some kind of disability, so he also did a lot of photo later on, a lot of
oh, really? Yeah.
portraiture. Um, but yeah, he was a great artist, and I think he did. It was like squares, like a gridded painting, I think,
Okay.
where like each like kind of square of the grid was its own thing, but from afar you would see the portrait of the person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're in Costa Rica right now, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I've never been to Costa Rica. So if you were talking to someone like me, how would you describe what's the difference in the culture between Costa Rica and America?
Um, I mean, obviously it's Latin, so in terms of, I mean, there's malls, obviously, but it's not like as big of a thing, I would say.
Yeah.
Definitely more outdoorsy. Also, we have a lot of beaches and forest, rainforest, all that. So here kind of you tend to do more of that type of stuff. Um, the culture, I mean, people are generally very easygoing and very relaxed. Obviously, I think the whole world is getting very culturally globalized. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah, for
every
sure.
kind of brand here that you'd find anywhere else. But then also how people want to dress and all that. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely yeah, almost. I would say it's more comparable to European attitude of like big city going out, like but our roads are a real problem. So too many cars, and the road system is kind of antiquated. So it takes a while to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we're slow on that front. But
How would you would you say that there's a big difference between the kind of the art style or of the artists in Costa Rica versus America? I know that's a very generic question
Yeah,
because there's so many different types of artists, but just
yeah.
as a
I mean,
general observation.
definitely it used to be kind of stuck in one kind of style and category and all that. But now, I mean, we have lots of, I mean, there's always been a lot of great artists. I think it was the consumer, like the people buying the art, was the antiquated public, whereas now, people are uh, kind of a younger crowd or a different generation. Also, perhaps, have experienced more global art. I mean, again, you got to remember if there was no internet and all that, is whatever would come by the museum, and museum shows here, like international shows aren't that going to be occurring as often. Um, but I mean, we've got great artists now, and all ages, lots of great women artists. But yeah, it's kind of a very wide, uh, a big ocean of artists now here.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. How do you, when you're painting, whether it's realistic or abstract, well, especially with abstract, how do you know when a piece is finished for you?
Hmm. I think it just kind of like comes into this harmonized, effect where like when you look at it, it's just complete. There's no like one section that kind of stands out like uncomfortably, I would say,
Yeah,
where it's like, oh, that's too empty or that's unfinished or that's overworked or too dark.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I think with abstract, again, it's kind of this, mm, it has to kind of emanate this kind of feeling, I guess, and like an energy of sorts, I would say. So when it gets to that point, that's when you know. So like this one that I'm working on, which is semi-abstract. I mean, it's it is it was trees basically, but now they're getting more. It's more about the color and the abstraction, the movement of the paintbrush. But right now it's competing with itself. I worked on it yesterday a little bit. You got it to that point, but so now I need to kind of pick and choose. All right, what areas are going to be my focal points, and light the values definitely are
yeah.
going to start to get pushed and create that movement. But
What does your art practice look like for you personally? Like, how do you have a kind of a goal for how much you work on art per week or per day, or what's that look like for you?
I mean, it's been a little bit stagnant just because of life getting in the way, and not in the bad sense.
Yeah,
Setting VAAS and other things here, and my personal life, getting
yeah,
married, moving into a house, and all of that. But yeah, definitely. I've always, the sketchbook that you mentioned earlier is, an important practice. I think to always have a sketchbook that that you can, you know, make mistakes into and have those off days, but just keep working and expressing ideas and working on anything. It's a good, so that I wouldn't say it's a daily practice, but definitely every other day. So at least half of the week I'm definitely sketching in a sketchbook. In terms of studio time and painting, I've just picked up in these last weeks, but I'm doing about two or three sessions throughout the week. Yesterday was a long session. The one prior to that was probably just 2 hours, but for me, I definitely like a 2 hour session. Less than that doesn't make sense for me to kind of get into a painting, because once you hit that nice groove, you don't want to step out. And so,
yeah, for sure, for
how about
sure.
you? What about you? You work on stuff every day.
I try to, yeah. It comes in seasons. Obviously, there are times where I'm more disciplined and I'll get up early and work for an hour or two every morning, that kind of thing. In the last couple weeks, that really hasn't happened for the same reason. Life, is
Yeah.
it's reality. So, I was out of town for a week, and then this week we celebrated our anniversary. I had a birthday, teaching classes, so just life stuff. So but I'll go through seasons where my goal is to do an hour or two every day, and so I'll usually get up in the morning and do it before I do anything. Then that way I get it done. And then I started getting back into sketching a lot in the sketchbook, just to keep that fresh. If I'm not doing a sketchbook, I usually have some kind of smaller project. So I've been drawing. It's Charles Bark drawing course. It's a big, thick book, and I've shared about it on here before. But it's a book that I use in our class. It's a lot of plates, so it's drawings of casts and those kind
Mhm.
of things. So I'll
Right.
draw from that just to keep myself fresh, and then also as an example to our students of, I'll have them draw from those same plates as well. Just as a good warm up or whatever. So yeah, so that's the goal for me is an hour or two a day, and then try to have several kind of works going at the same time. That'll change from time to time. Like at one point, I was like, I wanted to get one comic book page done a week,
Wow.
and then get like a larger thing done
Uh-huh.
in a month and that kind of thing. But for me, it's good to have those as guidelines, not so much as like law. Like I have to have this.
Right.
But if I don't, then I tend to just get lazy and procrastinate and just like, oh, I'll draw tomorrow or whatever. But
Yeah.
if I've got some kind of system, it's helpful for me to stay consistent.
Nice.
So Matt here says, let me put this up here. He says hyperrealism is definitely spot on for him. Yeah, for sure. Chuck Close is amazing pre-accident. However, since his accident, his style has had to drastically change
Right.
to prismatic portraits. I've not seen those, so I'll have to look that up.
Yeah.
They're still brilliant. I'd say I would be a better student than co-creator, but I would probably choose Caravaggio or Rembrandt. Yeah, yeah,
Good choices.
yeah, for sure. Those are amazing. Yeah, that's one of those questions where my wife and I talk about this all the time. Where someone says, what's your favorite TV show? If you
Mm,
if you hadn't been asked that, like you could rattle off like 10 of them, but then
exactly.
as soon as you're asked that, your mind goes blank and you're like, oh, what, who? So yeah, like Caravaggio, Rembrandt, Van Gogh. I mean, all those guys. Like my mind literally went blank, and I'm like, who would I? And I couldn't think of anyone. So I went back with Marcel Duchamp because that's the one I always go back to. But there's
Right.
tons and tons of artists that I would love to meet in person and just see their work, how they worked, and just talk to them. I think would be amazing. So,
Yeah.
uh, so Thomas, how would you define success as an artist?
Wow. I think so. Self fulfillment is got to be at the top of the list. You got to be doing something because you love it, because it makes you feel good. And then, when other people also appreciate your work and want to collect it, own it, and view it, obviously, I think that's the success. Um, I think a lot of people have this goal of living off of their art, and I don't know if that's an appropriate measure of success, because I think that could become a point of pressure, and maybe even disliking the process. So I think it's more that fulfillment of having kind of vision and goal, a goal on a piece, and executing it. I think that's success in my view. How about for you?
Yeah, I definitely resonate with what you said about living off of your art. Like I've tried to do freelance in the past and just absolutely hate it because it goes from something you enjoy and turns it into a job.
Right.
And part of me just I don't have good discipline. I mean I think I have good discipline in the sense that I put structure in place in order for me to accomplish things, but left to myself, my discipline is horrible. So like as soon as someone says, here's a piece, can you draw this for me? At first, I usually get excited about it, and then when I have to actually sit down to do it, I hate it because all I can think about is all the other things I'd rather be doing than that particular piece. And that's probably just a personal like weakness of mine. Like I'm sure a lot of artists struggle with that, and they just kind of either push through or they just like they just know how to discipline their mind not to think that way. But I've always had kind of the perspective to have a, you know, a regular job to pay my bills, so then I have the freedom to create whatever I want.
Right.
So I definitely I prefer that. So anyways, to go back to the question,
Hmm.
how do I define success? You know, that's really difficult because I feel like I agree with you, like, you know, in the sense that you're able to express what you want, you're doing the things that make you happy and give you a sense of fulfillment, not worrying so much about your status or your monetary success or your standing in the world or whatever that is. I think the beautiful thing about art is you can have that freedom. You can do whatever you want. um you know, it just it's it's kind of personally defined. I think for some people, if they get into it thinking, well, I want to be a famous artist, well,
Hmm.
you're not going to be successful unless you can actually define what that is, you know.
Right.
If And even something like that, to say, well, I want to be famous as an artist, well, what does that even mean? Because like, you could be famous locally, you could be famous nationally, you could be famous internationally, you could be famous historically. Like, there's all different levels of that. So, you know, I think those kind of definitions are a little too generic, that you'll just end up driving yourself crazy chasing the next thing, the next level of fame or the next level of finances or whatever it is. Whereas I think it's better to define it more in personal terms, that you're able to accomplish the goals that you've set out for yourself. You're growing as an artist. You're able to express the things that you want to express. You have that freedom, I think, and to be able to leave, you know, your work for the next generation, whether it's in your family or, you know, locally or whatever it is, to impact the other people that see your art.
Right.
I think it's all amazing aspects of being successful personally.
True.
You know, I think of people that were ultra super famous, like Mark Rothko, I
Hmm.
think, who ended up committing suicide. And so I
Right.
sit there and I think, you know, okay, yeah, he had worldly fame, but at what cost? You know, he was miserable. So like, that's not really success to me. I mean, I think some of his work is brilliant and I love it, but at the same time I think, well, was that were you really truly successful at life? I don't know. I don't know. I want to be very careful to cast judgment on him, but at the same time I'm like, man, like, yeah, did you miss something? I like it, the thing you were chasing you never found, you know? It's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So, and you always have to be careful with stuff like that because you don't know about like mental illness or, you know, personal, you know, you don't know someone's heart, you don't know what's going on. So, you know, I want to be very careful with what I say about that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I mean, there's plenty of examples of people that found fame and fortune and all that, but were completely miserable. And, you know, you're just like, well, is that really successful? I don't know that it is really. So,
Right.
so when you are deciding on submitting to shows or maybe even designing your own or whatever, how do you select what shows you want to submit for, or is it just kind of you submit to everything you can, or what's your selection process?
I haven't submitted in a while. There's a few that I have on my radar. One that is I suggest for everybody to always look at because they accept worldwide submissions from all level of artists. Is the Royal Academy in London, the RA.
Yeah.
It's called the RA Summer Show, and their summer show is open submission, and it's great. I mean, I've been able to see it in person, I think twice. Um, and I mean, the scope, the like how varied the art is amazing. Um, and it's all grouped in, so you can have like a well-established professional artist next to the work of well, you call it like a hobbyist or an amateur, or and it really puts that kind of sets the stage where both pieces have value, and have their own meaning, and and their place.
Yeah.
It's a nice one that reassures and reaffirms that everybody's there's no right place to be at to create art and be accepted into submission, an art submission, and all that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that one definitely is always on my radar. um, I've seen a couple where it's like thematic now, so it's like anything related to water, and of course
Yeah.
that kind of wide. Then here there's a show that's organized, that's biannual, and so that one I always submit to. I didn't last year, but the first year I did, and was lucky enough to participate with a photograph.
That's awesome. Yeah. Was a photograph, now your photography is more abstract, is that right? I've seen a few of yours, but I didn't
It's a
know if
little
that's
bit
all you
more
do.
abstract, yeah, for sure. I like classical stuff, so kind of the black and white, you know, kind of the craft of playing with shadow and light and all that. So it can be kind of city landscape type stuff, or I do like kind of more that kind of painting with light idea and the abstraction. So like, yeah, the Ferris wheel ones where it's like long exposure, and moving the camera. So, just kind of creating patterns from an existing object. That for sure is, up there for me. And, looking at details also in objects, buildings, whatever. And so it tends to lean into abstraction a lot more, for sure. I have an idea, which is again the going back to the importance of keeping a sketchbook and jotting down ideas. The sketchbook isn't just for drawing, or it's also the development of concepts. And writing. You know, Cutting out magazine pages from a magazine, even though now hard to find magazines or people who have magazines, but amongst those, like just writing down things, I have this concept for a photo series, and it's basically kind of making sculptures out of, I wouldn't say trash, but kind of just pieces of paper crumpled, and kind of like trying to make figurative sculptures, but not focusing on being hyper realistic, but then really manipulating the light through either daylight or whatever, or flashes, and that kind of illumination, but to really work on how the lighting can then give more volume and movement to the figurative sculpture that I would create. And I was thinking also like faces, kind of like those paintings of like faces are just a whole bunch of vegetables and stuff.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's that concept where from far away, like until you're up close, you'll notice that it's not a real figure or something, or a human, but it definitely captures it from a distance. Speaking of which, we should do a group show at the Academy, a little open call.
Yes. So Seth has mentioned that a couple times. I would love that. I think that would be amazing, for sure. What are some things that you hope to see happen at VAAS over the next 5 to 10 years?
Definitely. I mean, it'd be great, like having that kind of an annual show. Kind of like what I mentioned with the Royal Academy in London. Kind of something that people know that every year there's a juried show that you can submit to. Um, Having artists in residence would be cool. Kind of having a rotation of artists that can create there and have a mini show of their own. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely a goal to strive for. In the next 10 years, we should open another location, but to be determined where.
Yeah, yeah,
Beth always says we should open one here in Costa Rica, but we can have an exchange program.
yeah. That would be amazing. I think he's just saying that so he can go vacation there from time
Probably.
to time. How's your painting coming along?
Good.
Good, good, good.
Just kind of working here on these buildings and giving a little bit more form, slowly coming
Very nice.
together.
Very
I don't
nice.
want to overwork them either because I still have, all this foreground, but at least kind of have the volumetrics set out, kind of with the building. There's some buildings that are straight on, and then some that we have the side as well. So those
Yeah,
I'm trying to set up properly and get the sunlit side and the shadow side established.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I love the highlights in the water from here. It really is starting to look like translucent, like in the
yeah.
water part in the front of the boat there. Yeah, it looks great. Yeah,
Thanks. It's funny actually getting that shadow right underneath the boats. That was kind of the more challenging one
yeah,
because it's such a
yeah,
specific tone, and obviously when you see the image, you want to, your brain just says, "Oh, it's just dark." It's just go dark, and it's just a slight difference of tone.
yeah,
It's not that
yeah,
much darker, and
yeah,
it's really about putting lighter, mid-tone and highlights next to those, and that just creates that
yeah,
differential and pop.
yeah. Yeah, under the larger boat in the back, like right along the edge, it's slightly lighter, which you see that in life where the boat is reflecting against the water, so there's a
Correct.
shadow there, but
Yeah.
there's also that light that's that reflective light too. So
That
yeah,
bounce
it's awesome.
like, yeah.
No, it's great.
Thank you. How is yours coming along?
That's good. I think I'm finished with this page as far as the making a little bit of fixes. So up here in the top, I put windows in the door. So I had to
Yeah.
put a little arm there so you could see through there. And there's another window over on this side. And
Yeah.
then I added some little things to their faces because on this one, I started putting in some hardware on their faces as well. So I was like, oh, I need to go back and
Yeah.
do that over here. And there's also that glass there. So I had to put the glass in the other doors. So I think I'm finished with this page, that right here, and then I'm gonna finish up this other page. So I'm coming along just fine. So I'm excited about that.
All right. Yeah, I'll show you the other piece I worked on, which was also kind of I didn't, it was a reference. I was out in Utah, and
Oh yeah.
so, and they had, for like painting there, but it was kind of very cheap acrylics, very neon colors. So
Yeah.
yesterday I
Yeah.
came in and just kind of worked on, putting in a little bit more what would be like my values of paint, and
Yeah.
it turned out pretty nice. Just a little
Very nice. Yeah. Yeah.
piece. I like those kind of postcard,
Yeah.
pieces. I used to have the postcard size watercolor
Yeah.
pad, and that was also fun. Always fun when you're traveling. Just kind of do a couple of lines, set down some color, and it's a good way to do a quick color study without getting too obsessive about
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
it's gonna. Yeah.
The thing I noticed in that painting, It's
Mm,
such a small detail, but it's the little bits of red that you have at
yeah,
the bottom edge. Because I was just thinking how for a lot of people they'll just put that as a flat color, but you put in some reds that mirror the reddish orange or whatever of
correct.
the central part. Yeah, it was great. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a decision I made at the last minute there, but it was good because it gives that underpainting kind of effect, and then in terms of the color, it balances out that big block of that red in the middle, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
it becomes a lot more pleasing.
So you and Seth have talked a lot about Seth, especially just because I'm with him almost daily, but he talks a lot about Alvarez, and I know Alvarez was someone that was important to you as well. Um,
I didn't.
what?
I didn't have any classes with him, unfortunately, but I did go visit his studio and saw the paintings, and I mean, his
Okay.
craft was just unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah. So Seth talks a lot about just the influence he had, and like for you, was there any kind of mentors like that? If Yeah, I thought Alvarez was kind of one of those people, but were there other people in your life that were kind of that mentored you as an artist?
Yeah, I mean, not so much in high school, I would say, but definitely, in at Savannah at SCAD, there was several mentors. My drawing professor, she was, you know, just really great at explaining concepts and working color theory into your artwork and really showing, explaining and showing you how to appropriately use color in your favor, to your favor. And
Yeah.
it's a again, going back to like that shadow part of the boat, learning to accurately depict that, just how strong your piece can become with just small little, changes like that. And then
Yeah.
in photography, I definitely had, two big mentors there, and they were kind of the people I wanted to emulate in terms of their craft, their commitment, all of that, and my intro to photo professor, and then I had her again for another class. She was really great because she really pushed the concept and the value of the critique, right? And so
Yep.
learning how to take critique from others, but learning how to give appropriate critique was definitely a eye opener, and something that I feel really strengthened my capacity to look at my own work critically, and maybe also helps with not getting frustrated. When you instead of just like feeling like you're not achieving it, kind of just being more critical, and even when you are achieving it, to come back another day and not work on a piece, but just look at it critically and take notes, and then come back to work on it. That's definitely a big thing for me. I think we've talked about this in another live where sometimes you're really happy with how something turned out, and you come back a week later and you absolutely hate it, and
Yeah.
vice versa, where you feel like you're just not getting it, and then you come back and look at it a few days later, and you see that you actually did accomplish it by you resolved it visually in an appropriate manner.
Yeah, I actually had that happen today. So I was teaching a charcoal class,
Right,
and we were using tone charcoal. So we had black and white together on tone paper,
right,
and I gave them the option to. They did three drawings. They started with a sphere, and they just worked on lights and darks and that kind of thing. And then they worked on a pepper, which has a lot of mid-tone, and used the paper as the mid-tone. And then the last one, they could either do a self-portrait or a cast drawing of we have a David cast, and or they could draw each other as they're draw a portrait of each other, and they all picked the David because they were intimidated by the self portrait and definitely intimidated to be staring at the other person while they're drawing.
right.
Um, But I picked a self-portrait, and as I was drawing it, I felt pretty happy about it. And we went through and did a critique, and I let them critique mine too. And
Mm.
we're everything was fine. And then I looked at it later, and I was like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? I liked it now. Now I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, there's so much wrong with this.
Yeah,
It's
that's,
funny
that,
how you have a hard time seeing objectively your own work.
that's
It's
true.
like, yeah. Um, So, do you have artists that you are currently mentoring, or is that something you hope to do in the future? And if you do have someone that you're mentoring, how did that relationship come about?
I don't right now. I do, I'll go do like studio visits to other artists, friend artists and whatnot. And I also collect art, so I like to go and see if there's anything. But sometimes it's just a visit, and it's nice to see how they're what they're working on, and you know discuss kind of their ideas and what they want to put together for a show and all that. So it's more like that. I'm not mentoring anybody specifically here. In the past, I did give one-on-one classes, kind of very more on the mentor side type spectrum of giving a class. Um, but mine, I tend to be a very technical professor, I would say.
Hmm.
So I like to really work on how to how to achieve things realistically, so that then you can apply your creative freedom and license.
And when you are doing that kind of thing, whether it's teaching or mentoring or whatever, what is kind of the goal that you have for your students?
For them to be more self-confident in their skill set, in their ability to approach the subject matter. um, I had one of my first students. She was really loved comics, but I would only give her still lifes and very hardcore kind of academic. And at one point she kind of asked, she's like, "Are we ever going to draw comics?" And I was like, "Eventually, but don't worry about it." Like, the
Yeah.
point is, you're going to keep drawing comics. What I want you to see is what's going to happen in the months that you come and we do these
Yeah.
technical exercises. And yeah, her comics, just leaps and bounds from where it was, because
Yeah.
she all of a sudden understood so much about perspective, form, shapes, how light falls on a cylinder versus
Yeah.
when you have light from two sides coming in. So
Yeah.
all of those concepts that you only achieve through still lifes,
Mhm.
ellipticals. I remember the ellipses on any kind of cylinder.
Yeah.
That's always a nightmare for students. But
Right.
when you get that down, I mean, you can just draw anything from your imagination.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's so funny because we run into that same thing, or I do in my classes, where a student will come in. I just had this conversation with a student the other day. Like and it's partly him, but it was for a drawing 101 class, and we were talking about light and shadow and shading and reflective light and all those kind of things. And I had specific things that I wanted them to draw, and he kept taking out his sketchbook and drawing cartoons. And I
Right.
told him very directly but kindly, I just said, look, like, this is not a cartoon class, this is a drawing class, so I want you to draw the things I want you to draw. And he did not like that because it was not what his comfort zone was. Like, he wanted
Right.
to do the comics. And I tried to explain to him exactly what you just said, that the better you get at drawing realistically, the
Mhm.
better your comics will be, because you'll know how to, once you have the realism mastered, then you can morph it and change it and extend it and do all the things that you need to do to make good comics. And it vastly improves your storytelling when you can draw
Yeah.
realistically. And I think a lot of students want to get around the difficulty of learning how to draw realistically by drawing cartoons, because they think,
Mhm.
well, I can just skip all this, I can just draw things hyperextended or exaggerated or whatever. But I try to tell them, like, you've got to go back to the foundation. Once you have the foundations down, then all the other stuff comes in play. So I really appreciate you saying that about having that student wanting to draw comics. You're like, no, well, we're going to draw this other stuff right now.
Yeah.
I totally get that. Yeah. So Matt has a question here. He says, as an artist, what do you excel at and what is your biggest weakness? Hmm. Do you want to go first on that one?
My current biggest weakness is boats. So
Yeah. Well, it
they're a
doesn't
lot
look
more,
like it. You're doing a
they're a
great
lot
job with
more
that.
complicated than you think. It's just like the angle, like the bow, like how it actually shifts and your perspective to it. But man, I think architectural drawing, like kind of accurate architectural drawing of like buildings and all that, those perspectives, all that's always been challenging for me. Maybe it's a patience thing. I don't have the patience to go
Yeah.
line by line. I'm definitely more expressive uh, and yeah, impressionist in that sense. Forte, I would say human body. And leaves. I'm good at drawing leaves.
Yeah. Good. Yeah.
What about
Uh,
yourself?
yeah, so I think I am pretty confident with figure drawing and with charcoal. Um, Charcoal as a general medium, I feel pretty strongly about that.
Mm-hmm.
Or confident, I guess I could say. The challenge for me right now, and this is why I'm going to start working on it, is I I'm not as consistent on my sketchbook, and so I've been working on through a sketchbook now, but specifically drawing alien landscapes. I know that sounds like a funny thing to say, but I have in my head all these ideas for my comic book, but I haven't put them down on paper, and I think part of
Right.
it is just the fear of like, what if they don't look good, or what if like I yeah, I don't like that idea. So I thought, no, I need to sit down and I need to actually do it. I need to sit and draw landscapes either from reference or out of my head and come up with some new stuff and that kind of thing. So landscapes are a pretty big challenge for me. I don't do a whole lot of landscapes, which is funny because one of my huge drawings right now is a huge landscape. And part of the reason why I picked that is for that very reason, because I don't do a whole lot of landscapes. So I'm like, I need to work on this specific thing. So yeah, so I love figures, landscapes. I need to work at. So I'd say that. And it's funny. I enjoy like figure drawing and portraits, but portraits are actually very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And I actually we were having this discussion today because I'll be teaching a portrait class in July, and
Right.
I was telling the student it is a bit intimidating because portraits is one of the hardest things to do because even if you know how to draw a face, to
Mm,
draw a likeness is very difficult.
yeah.
Because even if it's slightly off, like it can take the most uh, minuscule line, you just fix it, and then all of a sudden the likeness is there. Like it's maddening sometimes.
Yeah.
So even though I can do them, they're very difficult to do. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah,
I used to do a lot more portraits, and it's something I've always enjoyed, but I stopped doing it. And so, yeah, it's one of those practice things, but because you need to get over those kind of initial hurdles of trying to just, make it look like the person versus drawing what's in front of you.
yeah, yeah,
I think, again, it's these just normal brain functions that, it's the way that you recognize people, right? So your brain just kind of puts things together. But, to really look at somebody, I actually had a photography professor who he did a lot of portraits, but he said that he always sat down with his subject for, like a coffee or something before, and he'd do several drawings of them just
oh
to
yeah,
for him to understand the facets of that person's face, like
yeah,
their nose, their foreheads, cheekbones, all that. And so then he could have like a more accurate approach to the lighting that he would have to use for that portrait of that person.
yeah. That's good.
That was always interesting, yeah,
Yeah,
because that's really what you need to break it down to. Is all right. What's the this person's like the bottom, the front, and the top of the nose look like, each person's different on that. And then, how the brows, where the brows sit, all that, and then the minuscule shifts of, the spacing between, one person's eyebrow and eyelid versus the next, right?
Yep.
Whereas you just want to group everybody together, and obviously that's not going to work.
Yeah, one of the exercises I think I'm gonna have our students do during the portrait class is to draw portraits of twins,
Oh,
so
wow.
they can see like how just the smallest differences will change the way a face looks. And to be able to draw twins, you have to pay attention to all those small details to get each twin to look right, you know?
Exactly.
So, yeah. I think the other thing too, when it comes to weaknesses, and I don't, I think I really, I don't know if it's struggle, but a challenge is definitely composition, which I like, I hesitate to say it because I try to be inventive with composition, but
Mm.
it's one of those things where I'll watch like a film and I'll just take note of like the cinematography and different shots that they take, and I'm like, man, I would never have thought to do it from that angle, or just how all the elements lined up in a certain way or whatever in specific shots.
Hmm.
And I find when I'm doing the comic book stuff, I will tend to rely on some of the basics of composition, which is good, but at the same time, like, I know that you could do some really experimental stuff with composition that I just need to grow in that area for sure. Like I could tell you, rule of thirds. I could talk to you about the golden rule and all those kind of things. The
Right.
leading lines and all that stuff. I could teach all that, but to take that and then apply it in new ways and try different things, that's always a challenge. So, and especially like for the comic book, you're constantly thinking about that because you're thinking about camera angles and different ways to approach things. And I'll look at some of my pages or panels and I think, that's a little boring, or it's a little forward or a little simple. And then I'll see like someone else and the way they've told a story. I'm like, man, the way they arranged the elements and did the camera angle on top of that is just like so dynamic. So I really need to grow in that area, like just making some of my drawings more dynamic when it comes to the comic book stuff for sure. So
Right. Yeah, I mean, composition is definitely a challenge. I mean, I love composition, and I think it's, just fascinating. But there's a lot of paintings that I think, the execution is, they can do it really well, but then the composition is just falls short. So, you're not, it doesn't keep the viewer engaged enough.
yeah, yeah.
And what do you envision for VAAS in the next years? We're almost at the end of the completion of the first year.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's been so exciting to work here and teach here and see the growth that has happened. So I'm definitely looking forward to it continuing to grow and expand. And, Seth and I have talked about a lot of things as far as, like you said, art shows, like fellowships and partnerships and those kind of things, and expanding out and doing more like of this, and then also creating I forget the word for it, but I don't want to say products, but like we've talked about doing like teaching materials and things like that. Um, yeah, so we've talked about like it expanding. It'd be amazing to get to a point where we have our own building where we can like design it ourselves and things like that would be amazing. I mean, I love our building. I love where we're at. I think it's amazing. but the idea of having like your own building that you've designed yourself, I mean, that's like
Oh yeah.
huge dream to do something like that. But obviously, just thinking about getting more students involved and seeing really, so like in Louisville, you have like the LVA, Louisville Visual Association, you've got the Melwood Art Center, you've got Speed Art Museum, those kind of things
Right.
that have been here for a long, long time. And so I believe, and I look forward to the day when our name is up there as well,
Right.
is um, something that people see as a place they can go for serious art instruction. But as well, whether you're a beginner or experienced, it's a place
Right.
that is just very different than what is being offered in other places. So I would love to see that, and to see like mentorships continuing to happen. Like I love the idea of being able to build into students sometimes like individuals that really have a talent and a future for art. There's a couple students I have in my head that are in classes right now that I would love to figure out a way in which we can build into them individually. And I'm not sure what that looks like, but at some point that we had like a specialized kind of
Hmm.
mentorship that we could do with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, and like you said, the art shows I think would be amazing. Um, yeah, just to expand our gallery, I
Yeah.
think would be great too. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
The gallery space would be good too.
Yeah.
More active in a few years or a few months, and
It's funny, I'm stuck on this, trying to find just kind of the right lines, kind of a design up here, and I think this is part of my weakness here because there are a lot of artists that will have a sketchbook just filled with just little abstract designs that you could put in, little patterns and things that you can put on doors and little areas and stuff like that. I don't have that right now, and that's an area that I definitely need to grow in, and work on.
right. Is there a comic book, like a Comic Con in Louisville or in Kentucky?
Yeah, I used to be a lot more involved in that with the Comic Cons as far as getting like booths and tables and things like that.
Hmm.
But it's been a couple years since I've done that. I know they have, I want to say, and maybe Matt would know or someone else that's from here would know better than I do, but I know they have one show this year. They have in the past have had like two or three major shows, but I think they've cut back a bit. But I know like in Lexington there's a big show,
Okay.
and then they have one in Frankfurt and definitely like Bowling Green and things like that. But I think it's PopCon here. I can't remember what it is. I've not been the last couple of years, but yeah, they do have one here, and then they have the big one is in Lexington for sure. So I wonder how Seth is doing. He's doing an exploration oil painting right now with the students, so he's
Funny.
missing out on our intriguing conversation. Is your is your wife an artist?
No, she's not.
Does she like art at all,
Yes.
or
Oh
yeah?
yeah, no, she enjoys art quite a bit, and it helps when your partner is an artist and explains things differently. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
she likes art a lot.
Well, good. Good, good, good.
Yeah, yeah. Your wife, she's an artist, right?
Well, that's a funny kind of a funny joke, running joke in our family that she studied music in college and she's a singer.
Right.
And I would always tell her that music and like drama are the arts with an S at the end. It's the arts. So I would always say that she's an artist, not an artist. And so that's just a funny little dad joke. But yeah, so she definitely has a lot of respect for music. She's not really into like visual arts at all, but she loves what I love, so it's not, it's not a big deal. Like it, we don't approach art galleries the same way at all, so it's not something she really enjoys going to. Whereas I love going to art galleries and walking around. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so. Matt also asks, what inspires you to create? I'll let you go with that one if you want.
Um, yeah, I mean, just when you get an idea and you want to just execute, like bring it to fruition. Um, I don't know. I mean, again, just I'm a visual person, so everything. I say this also. We're talking about my wife, and she's like, yeah, like I'll take a picture of something, and she'll look at the photo on my phone, and she's like, yeah, I did not see that at all, right? So it's kind of like
Hmm.
this tendency to kind of mm, pick apart at the world in that sense and say like, oh, that's a nice little detail there, or this little area. So I think that's one thing that inspires me is kind of looking at things and just that need to recreate it, to paint it, draw it, or photograph it. I think
Hmm.
that's kind of like a compulsion, I guess, that leads
Yeah.
to me creating art. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think when it comes to deciding what to create, I often it often goes back to kind of a larger philosophy of being an artist, like just thinking of like what do I want to put out in the world. So um right now I'm really kind of honing in on this third book, and so I enjoy seeing like there's a couple reels I've seen on social media of some sci-fi like independent little creation, like movie little short reel movie things that have been made. That's when I see those, I like immediately want to go back and work on my book.
Right.
So I would say definitely other artists, seeing what they're doing, not necessarily like copying what they're doing, but as more of a motivation or
Right.
inspiring me to work on new ideas for myself. So other artists is a huge thing, and then also just thinking in terms of like my own purpose in the world, like what am I doing? Like why am I putting stuff out in the world? And so, part of my goal as an artist is to create things that are beautiful and inspire people to reflect on and contemplate life, or contemplate the meaning of life, of God, of their purpose, those kind of things. So I feel like to create art that way really gives me my own sense of purpose and meaning, and is inspiring to know that if I can create something that will inspire someone else to consider some new ideas, and yeah, I love that. So
Yeah. Well, for sure. Yeah, for me, the same. When I see other great art, it's just very inspiring to want to create. And like you said, it's not to go copy their stuff. It's just like you feel that kind of impulse to want to go also create great pieces that you're gonna be happy with, and that other people are gonna get inspired by.
yeah. Yeah. Well, we've got about 20 minutes, and I thought for sure I was going to be able to get to my next page, but I think it'll take me about 20 minutes to figure out what design I'm doing on this door. Uh,
What's the door? What's
so it's
context, I guess.
so there, I'll kind of back out here. You can see the whole page. So
Hmm.
it's a glass door, so they're looking through the glass as it's closing on them. And I didn't want to do too much detail up top because there's so much detail on the bottom 2/3 of
Hmm.
them. So I'm just trying to break up the space a little bit by just giving it kind of an Art Nouveau type design. On this page over here, you can see the
Hmm.
portion of the door. It's got those kind of swirls on it.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to emulate that kind of same look over here on these doors too. So
Very cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of those things where I always think, if I'm sitting there flipping on through reels on social media or looking at Facebook or whatever, there's so many times I'm like, what am I doing? I could be using this time to like just be sketching little patterns or sketching like a helmet design or something like that. So I've been trying to be more intentional about using a sketchbook in that way, uh,
Hmm.
being more productive with the time that I have. What is as you've visited different art galleries and things like that, what is the most amazing or slash famous work of art that you've seen in person that you've remembered? That you just walked away like, man, I can't believe I saw that for real.
Hmm. I think I've seen a couple of good stuff. I think of what was the latest. I mean, the Sistine Chapel is definitely just
Oh
awe-inspiring,
man. Yeah.
amazing. It's like because it's so enveloping. I mean,
Yeah.
unfortunately, full of people. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's a very touristy place, but yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, just the grandness of it, and the perspective, the shift of perspective, from one side to the other. Um, yeah, that one's amazing.
I've heard you don't get very much time in there. That kind of push you through a little
Yeah,
bit.
it's kind of it's just tons of tourists, and so they're just hurdling everybody through. And there's
Yeah.
some areas where you can kind of stand for a little bit, but and then they don't let you take photos, so
Oh, you can't take photos of it? Not even with your cell
uh,
phone?
you know,
Man,
yeah. So it's
that's interesting. I didn't realize that. Yeah, I think for me, the two I definitely remember
mhm,
is I had a chance to go to New York City a couple of years ago, and we went to the MoMA,
right,
and they have the Starry Night in there, Van Gogh's Starry Night.
nice,
But the crazy thing about it is like that piece itself is like a celebrity. So it was like the room was packed just to see that,
right,
and I ended up taking a picture of the people trying to get a look at the painting up close.
yeah,
And you do get a chance to go up there. It's not like packed like where you can't walk around. I mean, there's just like 20, 30 people waiting their turn to get a close up look at it. So that was pretty amazing to see that. And then as I mentioned before, Marcel Duchamp was and is one of my favorite artists, and so I had a chance to go to Philadelphia, and at the Philadelphia Museum of Art has the largest collection of his work, pretty much all his major pieces. And
right,
so there's a piece in there where it's called "The Bride Stripped Bare" by her bachelors, and it's this huge glass piece. It's like 10 foot tall, and it's in two panes, and it's just incredible. And so to see it like in in person was both It was kind of weird. It was kind of on one side, it was amazing to be there, but then it was a little bit, I want to say disappointing because when I saw it up close, I was like, oh, this doesn't look as like well put together as in the photographs. But it still was. I mean, I have to give him a break because he's working, 1900, so it's he doesn't have the same materials we do, but it was still pretty amazing to see it in person, and
Right.
then to walk around. They have a whole room of just all his stuff, and so I was able to see, yeah, all his major works. It was pretty amazing. So.
That's pretty cool.
And there was at the MoMA, there was Picasso's Bathers, I think what it's called. It's got the 5 women in it, and it's one of his most famous abstract works, other than Go. How do you say it? Guernica or whatever, that huge one.
Yeah.
I'm
Veronica.
not. Yeah, I've not seen that in person, but the other one is pretty famous of his, and that was pretty cool to see. I didn't realize how big it was either. It was really pretty massive painting, but that was pretty cool. I mean, I've kind of like there's some stuff of Picasso I really love, and then other stuff I'm like, not super impressed with. But I guess that's every artist, So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, with Guernica, the impressive thing about it, I saw it once, is that there's a lot of versions of it before the final one, and
Oh
so
yeah,
if you go to, I think it's in the Prado Museum, I want to say, or the Reina Sofia, and it's just amazing to see kind of several of them and kind of how it's there's a deeper narrative to it, than just the one, which, the one has a lot going on. But when you see the versions leading up to it and the small changes, and the fact that, he did, he'd do another painting instead of just kind of working on the one, but just instead just start again, start over.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was really surprised. I saw Salvador Dali's was it the Remembrance of Time or the Permanence of Time? It's the one where all the clocks are. It's this
Hmm.
famous one where they're all like melting. I had no idea how small that one was. Like it's super small. I always thought it was like this huge painting because some of his other ones are quite large, I think. But yeah, to see that one in person was pretty amazing too. So. We've got about 12 more minutes. This is the part where Seth usually gets into his announcer voice and is like, all right, guys, we've got 12 more minutes. If anyone has anything they want to ask us, blah, blah, blah. I'm not like that. So, I think I will be able to get this page done as far as to a stopping point that I'm happy with, and then I'll be able to move on to the next page. So I am happy about that. Do you have any plans for your next paintings, or do you tend to work on a few at a time and not worry about the next one until you're done?
Um, I usually try and work. I wouldn't say I work on one at a time, but I also don't do multiple. I think there's one main one that I'm working on, trying to get it to finish. But you get saturated of working on the same painting, or you run into the same frustrations. So sometimes some paintings, they go through to completion, and others I just kind of get to this one point. So I've got one that I was working on um, before, and it's at a point where I'm not sure, where I want to take it. So because it is a completely, my own creation type idea of a painting. So it's kind of like a figure in the foreground, and then there's some hedges that look like a labyrinth type thing. And it's with this perspective. So I'm trying to decide, like, do I want to exaggerate the perspective of the hedges, and then those kinds of decisions I need to kind of take before I continue on it. But yeah, but that's probably, so I'll definitely want to get this one completed. And then, I'm working on that one at the same time, just because it's more abstract in that sense that it's more just brush stroke.
Yeah.
But those two should probably be completed, kind of at the same time.
Nice.
Hopefully in the next week. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. So Matt says, do you think paintings are smaller today than, say, in the 1400s? If so, what's your thoughts as to why?
I think so. I think, paintings were a lot larger back then, but, they also, it depended on the subject matter, and it being, about the portrait of, somebody, royal or something like that, or a battle scene or things like that. But there's a lot of modern painters that do huge canvas stuff.
Yep, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I think the majority do tend to go slightly smaller. But I think because before there wasn't as much of a market for art to be bought for the home. It it was all castles, estates, and museum. Whereas now, to comply with like the smaller walls at home, I think that's why artists tend to go smaller now.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I was thinking of not that I know his work very well, but for whatever reason, my mind went to Clifford Still, which is, I don't know his stuff very well, but I do know, like, he did these very large canvases, very abstract. He was big in the 80s, I believe, and 90s, and he has his own museum now in Texas where it houses all his own work. And I saw his stuff on a podcast, and there was they were walking through the museum, and there were the huge paintings. I mean, they're like 15 foot tall by 20 feet wide or whatever, just these huge abstract paintings. So it's funny when you said you think paintings are smaller today. I'm like, my immediate thought is, well, that especially in the 80s and 90s, that like it was kind of a thing to do these huge paintings. And so there's definite examples of paintings that are really large today, but that's probably also kind of specific to the artist. Some artists work small, some artists work big. It just depends. But I like what you said about there's a market now for house paint, like paintings for your house, whereas they didn't have that back then. So yeah.
True. Yeah, and I just saw earlier this year a show of Robert Longo, who I also admire a lot. He does this hyper realistic charcoal drawings that look like photographs. I mean, you'd swear it's a photograph, but it's charcoal. I mean, they're huge. They're the size of the wall of your room. But he uses size as a way of putting these, images that are, oftentimes about conflict, like historical, like conflicts that are occurring at the moment, in our history. And so, he really uses size to project onto you, like this giant issue, right? Whereas if it was smaller, maybe it wouldn't be as impressive. And then the fact that it is charcoal drawing and not a photograph, I mean, that just really works to the advantage of the piece. So I think that's another consideration is, the size of the canvas you want to use, can have an effect in either direction, whether you do something in a small, format or large format.
Yeah. What was his name again? Matt would probably really appreciate that because he really loves hyperrealism. What was the name of the artist?
Robert Longo.
Longo. Okay. Longo, like
Yeah,
how it sounds? Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Matt. Hopefully you heard that because there's another example of a hyperrealist for you to check out. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, he's great. And I think there's a couple of documentaries also on his work. But I mean, well, I don't know how clear it'll come through. Let me see. Here's one of his famous ones. Is this
Oh, wow.
wave? Yeah, I mean, but they're huge, So,
Yeah.
and then he's got like sharks and boats, airplane stuff. Yeah, it's all kinds of.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think I'm gonna zoom out here and
Yep.
show you both together.
Okay.
I think I'm pretty happy with these. So
Yeah.
there on the left is I think page 4, and so they're pulling in someone on a hospital bed
I see.
into a little through a doorway up in the upper left there. So he's going into this hallway, and there's
Okay.
some people back there, and then the very next page, they're closing the door, and the robots are kind of keeping them in there, and they're realizing they're being trapped in there. So I was
Nice.
trying to do that the pattern up here on this door to kind
Yeah.
of reflect the pattern on the floor over here, where it's kind of
Mhm.
all these swirls, just to give it consistency through the whole thing, through both these pages. So I think I'm pretty happy with where it's at right now. So we'll
Great.
see. We'll
Yeah.
see once I ink it. I might change my mind at that point, but we'll see. So
That's
yeah,
looking good.
what's that? I'm sorry.
It's looking good. Is there going to be anything in that bottom corner of the one with the gurney, let's say?
Over here, you're talking
Yeah.
about?
Or you
Yeah.
just leave that as a negative space?
Well, it's there for the dialogue
Okay.
bubbles and things like that. So
I
I tried to I did that on purpose, like
Mhm.
compositionally as well. But then
Mhm.
I thought, for space to put dialogue and things like that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
how about you?
The advancement on today. So the building's definitely got a bit more structured in.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
Now I got to go in with details of doors and windows. I'm not
Mhm.
going to go overly detailed, but just give that kind of sense of depth and which buildings are in front of the other ones. And then I did a lot of work on that highlight there of the water and started
Mhm.
to lay some on this side as well.
Mhm.
So you can see now that shadow of the small boat is really popping
Yep. Yeah.
through, and I haven't touched that at all. That's how it was. But by
Yeah.
adding those light highlights and lighter midtones around it, it just started to give me that sense of floating and whatnot. So
That's amazing. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Looks
a
beautiful.
challenge for sure. Doing water, I think this is the first time I've painted water. So,
Yeah. No, it's great.
but I've seen a lot of artists, and I always admire when when water is painted. And looked at it for hours, analyzed it, and it's these kind of intricacies. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, in the final 2 minutes, do you have any words on the other painting that you're gonna? What are you gonna do next on the one behind you?
that one, yeah. I mean, here it's going to be a lot more about looking for a compositional kind of like the movement that I want, for your eye to follow. And the main thing I want, it has a lot of color, but my vision for it is that it's actually going to look quite white in the sense of I want to put a lot of light tones on top, but I want that color to kind of optically mix through. And so
Mhm.
when you get closer to it, you'll realize that there's a lot of color. But from far away, I actually want it to be quite a pale painting.
Yeah. Wow, awesome.
But
Well,
right now,
Thomas,
it's dramatic.
I'm sorry. What'd you say?
Right now, it's more dramatic than what it's going to end up like.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Well, Thomas, it's always good to spend time with you. Thanks
yeah,
for
great seeing
hanging
you.
out and drawing and painting together. I appreciate the conversation. And we thank everyone that tuned in. And I'm Chad Nuss, the Humble Wizard. This is Thomas from the Visual Arts Academy and studio. I couldn't think of the S. What was the S? And studio in Louisville, Kentucky. And we thank you all for tuning in. And we'll see you next Saturday. See you guys.
Bye.
Appreciate it.